there are a few structures up in the head. If you want to spend some time with your old friend in the respiratory system. Right? Then, thou shalt know the teeth thou shalt. So you're supposed to be able to look at this person's dentures and tell me incisor and bicuspid. Be able to tell me what teeth are. We also have that written in German for you on this. I invite. All right. The problem you're going to run into is when you get to this model. Anyone know what this is?
The liver.
The problem with livers, on every model, they're built differently. So if you photograph only this one, I guarantee you the stickers will be on a different one that looks very different than the one you photographed. So you have to photograph every liver because they're all built differently.
That's not fair.
I didn't do it. So if you looked at this liver and this liver, you flip them over, you will see that they look really nothing like each other on the bottom. Yes, so the same words are arranged differently on each model. So you're going to have to go through each liver individually because they all vary somewhat. I'll walk you through later about how to tell what's what. But the livers are the most different. Can you say that in English? The most different of any of the models are the livers. They're all very different. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You have 6 different liver models. You're going to take 6 different pictures and memorize them individually because they're all somewhat different. So from my experience, livers are the anger that you're going to build. Okay? And that pretty much covers the model part. I'm going to do first is go through the histology that thou shalt know. I'll do that now to save you a little time. And then I'll turn you a list of the models. We'll do those later. But for histology, you're supposed to be able to walk up to a microscope next week, some evil man, and tell me the organ, the region, the layer, the tissue of the cell. Be able to tell me everything about that slide. That you can. So your first goal is to figure out what organ the slide is, and then go from there. All right? So in your packet of pain, you will notice that under each organ, they have a big part, and they go to a histology part. So I'm going to walk you through where it says histology at the end of each organ group. So there's one after the esophagus, there's one. So at the end of the big stuff, we have a histology section. I'm going to walk you through some histology of these organs, and then I'll turn you loose with some models. Okay, so you get a feeling of where we are. I'm going to use JDoc to begin with, because I like JDoc. All right, so I'm going to hide it so you can't see what I'm doing.
So are you just
So, if I had this on the quiz next week, I would ask you, what organ is this? And you would say?
Esophagus. Small intestine.
Anus! No. You can see where I clicked, right? I mean, it's esophagus. The trick is, how would I know that's esophagus if you didn't see what I clicked? So you're going to zoom your eye to the edges. So let's review our word. What do you call the white space? Lumen. So that's the same in the airway, it's the same here. With the same organization. So you have a layer that's around the lumen. That would be which layer? Mucosa. It should be on there. Yes. Hold on. You whiners. Go to the very page 8. General histological pan of the alimentary canal. Did everyone see that? Yeah.
You said it under the organ name. So
it is, but I didn't say everything was under the organ name now, future healthcare professionals. Don't get my ire up before you take your exams. Right? You saw last time what can happen when I turn up the heat, right? Okay. So, we have lumen. Then we have mucosa. What do you call the area under the mucosa? Mucosa. What do you call, this is new. As you push food, these are muscles. What do you call the area where the muscles are? Muscularis externa. So in the respiratory system didn't have that, right? You don't push air. Here you're pushing food. So I have my lumen, mucosa, submucosa, muscularis externa, and a serosa over there. So the same layout as the respiratory system. Okay? The trick is those layers vary by which organ you're in. So you have to look at those layers and visualize them individually. So in an esophagus, you're looking at the mucosa. What tissue is in the mucosa of an esophagus? Very good. Lining, Dorito effect. What lines your esophagus? Stratified squamous epithelial tissue. I should funk you all for missing that. Nice. Yeah, Highland Park. Right. So you're gonna look for the stratified squamous epithelial tissue, and you say, oh, the only place that's stratified, non-keratinized, would be my esophagus and mouth, because you learned that in 231. So if you see stratified squamous, you're gonna say esophagus or mouth. That's the only place you're gonna have the Dorito effect. Right? So the mucosa would tell you that's an esophagus. All the organs would have the same layering. The trick is that tissue there. Okay? So on a test, you would say that's an esophagus. I pointed here, you'd say, well, that is the mucosa layer. If I said, what tissue is that? You would say stratified squamous. Formerly non-keratinized stratified squamous. Make sense? So you have to name the organ, the layer, and the tissues. If I were to point there. Make sense? All right, so for each organ you're doing, you want to zoom in like that. Pick the organ, find the layer, tissues, and kind of zoom in. Yes, so on the muscle tissue, while we're on that end of town. So notice that they're arranged differently. These ones are coming at you. That's why they're circles. These ones are going the long way. So what do you call the ones that are going this way versus this way? If you look, a circular layer and a longitudinal layer. Okay. So it turns out from the slide, the circular layer is always the one that's closest to the lumen. But these ones are the circular layer. They squeeze the food. The longitudinals then shove it down. So the circular layer is the most, I don't know how you want to phrase it, I guess the one closest to the lumen, and the longitudinal is the most external or the furthest away from the lumen. That's true for all of them. So your circular is first, longitudinal is second. There's always two layers and they're arranged opposite. So you're going to look down the cells here and along the cells here. That's why these look kind of round, these look long. That's true for all of them, except for the stomach. So on a test, you're going to say esophagus, mucosa, stratified squamous epithelial tissue. Today answer, yes.
You know the types of tissue for all of the layers for all of the organs?
Only if they ask specifically, otherwise it's just the general ones up here. So for example, smooth muscle would be your muscularis externa. Right? So on some of them they actually specify, like in the esophagus they say stratified squamous. That's a nerve, you can't see it. The myenteric plexus would be in the muscle layer. That's where the nerves are to control it. Nerve plexi from 231, right? So let's go through. So that's esophagus with those layers. Doing okay, esophagus? Say yes. All right. Let's try another one. Name the organ.
Mouth.
Mouth would work, or
Esophagus.
esophagus. How did you know? Stratified squamous is the same organ. I just hit you with a different view. But again, I'm looking at the mucosa. I see stratified squamous epithelial tissue, non-keratinized, has to be my mouth or esophagus. Or my anus. Right? So mucosa, submucosa, muscularis down here. You're looking for that difference of the mucosa. So far, so good? All right, Smarties. Not an esophagus.
No.
So you know, because that's not stratified squamous. What organ would that be? Those are not villi, believe it or not. Those are not silly either.
It's a stomach.
That is a stomach. All right, so how would I know that's a stomach? So it's not an esophagus because it's not stratified squamous, right? So the trick is you're going to look at the arrangement of the cells. If you notice, kind of pretend, you see these long kind of white areas, these long red areas, right? It looks kind of feathery. So those are called the gastric pits. Those are the holes into your stomach. So they look like a pit to a drunk Roman, so they call them gastric pits. So you're going to look at these, it's very pitted, right? So these are the gastric pits.
So that's the red cell, is that?
So these, if I zoom in on them, which I will next, we're going to zoom in on our gastric pits. Right?
The pits are the red and the white part?
Pits are the,
Or just the white part?
I don't think I have a close-up any closer to this one, but if you zoom in on these a little better, you'll notice that they're kind of tall cells. These are simple columnar, which you learned in 231. Right? But the red things would be the cells, the white would be the pits, but there's an absence of the cell. So you're looking for this feathery, white and red, long pits, long depression. Not fingers. Someone drilled holes in some old wood. That's a stomach. Hmm? Yeah, so mucosa on this one goes from here off the screen. So submucosa is somewhere down there. This is just the mucosal layer.
Can you see any of the glands in this picture?
No, they're actually at the very bottom, so not specifically. If you look at our gastric pit, so that tells you stomach.
Is that the same thing as Rugae?
No, rugae are the big folds they're on. So that's not rugae yet. Yes.
If we could see the gland, would we be able to see the individual like cells?
No, you cannot. So I'll show you that. So hold my mouse right down there at the very bottom. The ends of the pits, where they sort of end, those are the gastric glands. That's where the fluids come out of. So at the end of the pit, excuse me, are the gastric glands. So on the slide, I'm not going to point to one of those, say, name it on a slide. There's a diagram in your book, though. And in though, there are some cells. So on the slide, you can't see the cells of the gland. I could ask you what they do because they're in your lab packet. I wouldn't do that on a slide. So on a slide, I ask you what organ. You say stomach. Mucosa, those are gastric pits.
So you want to know what the cells do then?
So what the cells do. But you can't see them clearly on the slide very well. They're stained differently. If you said stomach, gastric pit, I'm okay with that so far. Make sense? So the glands are at the bottom of the pit, so you can't always see each one. Okay, stomach, looking for feathery, whispery, pit-like. Just so you can identify, these are the bottom of the pits. These are the glands. So this is really up close. You can tell that these cells kind of end. There's not a lot of detail there, but that's where the glands would be, is at the bottom of the pits. I'm not going to ask you that slide particularly. Alright, so let's try this. Let's try. Okay, hit it. No. Stomach again. It's still the pit concept. So just to back out. But these are not fingers. These are long white lines all the way down. So those still are pitted. So those are still the gastric pits.
Can you see any of the muscle on here?
Yeah, and this one you can see the muscles are here down.
Oh.
It's all the muscle layer.
So what kind of muscle?
So this would be the smooth muscle, but the stomach has an oblique. So there's an angled, and then a round, and then a long. The third layer. But these are the smooth muscles here, muscularis externa. Submucosas here, mucosas there. So you're looking at the pits. Alright, so let's try those.
This is your intestines.
These are intestines. How do I know that's not a stomach?
It doesn't look like a finger.
These look like fingers. So the fingers would be obviously like your hand, this finger. Right? So you can make out that these are very, very fingered areas. That's not a stomach. It's not a pit or a feather. This is a finger. So that's going to be your small intestine.
Those are the villi?
Those are the villi. Very good. So, if you go back, this. That's a stomach because it's feathery or drill block. It's not fingery. How's that for scientific sound? Something like this. Those are fingers. Very broad, very obvious that they're big, long things. And yes.
Is the crypt the whole?
We're getting there. Hold that thought. So here's my villi. Alright, so these are the fingers of my small intestine. Makes sense? So you're going to see fingers. Okay, so let's go back to this one. So if I point to the organ, you say it's an intestine, small intestine. I point to this thing, you say a villi. I point to, which is part of the mucosa. What kind of cell is in your small intestine from 231? Simple columnar. Everyone was a dark time. Right. These are simple columnar, right? Because they're long cells, one layer lining the villi of your intestine for absorption and secretion, right? Okay. So then the trick is there's some words about the villi. If you look at the villi, every once in a while there's a little hole under the villi. Here, 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 and here. We call those the crypts. Crypts of Levikum. So a crypt is where you bury people underground, right? So these are buried under the fingers. So these are the crypts. These are intestinal crypts or crypts of Levikum. So if I pointed here, that's a crypt. That's a finger, that's a crypt.
Can we just say crypt?
Crypt is fine. Okay, okay.
All the things.
Yeah, so then we're getting to the glands.
What's the funny name?
Cryptolibicunds. Lieberku umlaut HN.
Is intestinal crypt okay?
Yes. Or crypt is fine. Okay, so you have the cryptolibicunds. The problem is this red line. This red line represents mucosas above the red line. Below the red line, what layer would you be if you're below the mucosa? Okay, if you notice there's round things in the submucosa. These are the glands. These are the Brunner's glands or intestinal glands or duodenal glands. So if you're above the line, you're a crypt. If you're below the line, you're a gland. So you got to find the red line. Remember that was Syria? The red line? Right? Find the red line and go below it, you are a gland. Above it, you are a crypt. And they also look different. So you're looking at that line and seeing if there's something below it, which would be the gland. Okay? Let me try that one.
What's that red line called?
That is the mucosa muscularis. So here we go. So now we're zooming in. Oh, hey, I see a red line. I see round things above called what? I see round things below called glands. And that's we're zooming in between the mucosa above, submucosa. Here's that muscularis stuff again. So when you get to intestine, try to find that line and then look at what's above and below it. Because that's a trick you're going to have to know to figure out which part of the organ you're in. Yes?
That was my next question. How do you do duodenum versus
Let me do the other one, then we'll do that. We don't do small testing.
just the histology for it?
Yes. Here is another slide. What organ is this? Small intestine. How'd you know?
Fingers.
Saw me fingers, right? Same logic. My fingers. What are these round things here, 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 here? Those are crypts because this is the red line. So you're always going to see crypts near the finger. You're going to see fingers and crypts. Name it.
Small intestine.
Small intestine again. You have funny looking fingers. You see crypts?
Yes.
I do. Here. Right, the red line is kind of broken down here. So in my mucosa, I'm going to see the crypts of the ligaments near the fingers. Okay. Okay, so to go back through those again. Okay, those are below the red line. And so those are what?
Glands.
These are the glands. The glands only exist in the duodenum, the first part of the small intestine. So if you see those glands, you're going to say it's the duodenum, the first part. So that's why they call them duodenal glands, or glands of Brunner. Yes, submucosal glands, yes. So if you see the glands, you know it's the first part of the small intestine. I'm going to prove that to you by clicking on the other parts, right here. Because there's no glands. You have crypts but no glands. That?
So that's not a
Don't look at him. Yeah, so that's not the duodenum. That'd be jejunum or ileum. If you see glands, it has to be the D one, the first third of the small intestine. So all of them have fingers and crypts. The glands tell you if it's the first one or not. Right? So let's try that skill. I'm going to turn this on. Randomly throw one up here. Is that a duodenum? Yes or no? No. How did you know?
No glands.
No gland. I can see crypts, but I don't see glands. That's your giveaway. So if you see glands, you know it has to be a duodenum. If you don't see glands, then it could be some other place. Okay, so everyone has fingers.
White circle.
Goblet cells. Those are the goblet cells you learned way back when.
So why is crypt listed under duodenum?
Because they have crypts. So everyone has crypts. And not everyone has glands. Everybody has crypts. Okay, my happy few. Name it.
Large intestine.
That is a large intestine, aka colon. How did you know it wasn't a small intestine? Because you already did that, yes, but that won't help you next week. What makes this look different than the other ones?
It has lots of holes and crap.
Holes and crap would work. Okay, so a little trick. Notice there's no big finger sticking out, right? You don't see any villi. But you also don't see the pit, the feathers like the stomach. So what it looks like you did is you took your fingers and put them together, like this. I can see where a finger would be, but it's filled in. So that's how you're going to tell a colon is that the fingers, there's no villi, but it looks like there should be. The other trick is you have all these white circles. They're goblet cells, right? What do goblet cells make from 231?
Mucus.
Mucus. Poop is slimy, right? That's where it comes from. You're sliming your poop to get it out. So you have lots and lots of mucus in your colon and fingers together.
So it's the same thing?
Yeah, so there would be crypt still, right? But then you have the goblet cells and the mucosa. Okay. So let me do another picture of that. To prove I'm not making this stuff up. Is that a large intestine?
Yes.
It is. Fingers together, lots of slime, right? But it's not a finger and it's not a feather. And it's not a stratified squamous.
Single columnar.
Single columnar still, with lots more goblet cells.
So, do the crypts have goblet cells?
Yes,
Okay, so
they can be. Like this one has a lot of goblet cells. The goblet cells increase along with the organ. So the duodenal ones have less. Maybe.
let's see more slides.
Yeah, more slime.
Are all of the intestinal have a special name?
All crypts.
So they're all the same.
Yes. Crypts of the cocoon is. Hold on. Maybe there might be different names for the colon one. They're all crypts. So I'm going to randomly throw some of these organs at you. And we're going to see how well you can name them. Let's try. Which one should I go to? Let's do. Okay, organ number 1. Your random quiz here.
Small intestine.
So we've heard all of them now, so let's try to narrow it down. So let's eliminate some that are obviously. Is that stratified squamous epithelial tissue? No, so it can't be esophagus. That's out. Are those fingers?
Yes.
No, those are not fingers, right? So that's small intestine's out. The question is this fingers together or is it pits? If you look at how it's made, this looks like someone drilled underneath. Those are pits. So that is that's a stomach. So pits go down to the gastric glands. You don't see fingers. I don't see goblet cells. Well, yeah, but this one doesn't look feathery. Doesn't look.
So, are there any other identifying features of the stomach besides the feathers?
You just have to memorize that. So the pits are the defining. You see lots of pits. So that's a stomach. Pitted, feathery-ish. Name the organ.
Esophagus.
Under one little voice in the wilderness here. Esophagus. How did you know?
Stratified squamous.
Stratified squamous. None of this other stuff really much matters. So I see that protected layer. It has to be an esophagus and/or mouth. Esophagus. So we're looking at the mucosal layer. First job. What organ is it? Okay, try this one. Let's do. Name it and play it.
Large intestine.
One little voice for large intestine. See nods. Yes, large intestine, also known as colon. How'd you know?
It's squished.
Looks like fingers together, lots of goblet cells. So the stomach can look like together, but they're not going to have the goblet cells like you see. I don't see pits running down. I see fingers running down with slime. So goblet cells, colon, large intestine. All right, lots of slimy food. Fingers together. Okay, smarties. Let's try. Just from this picture alone, you should all tell me what it is.
Small intestine.
Small intestine. How'd you know?
Fingers.
They're very clearly defined fingers. So you don't get that feathery, you don't get the colon thing. You'll know when you see them, right? You got to see the finger. Villi. Formally. Now we're going to make them a little shorter. I want you to name which part of the small intestine this is. So is this duodenum or jejunum or ileum?
Oh, yeah.
I hear someone say red line, some fine red line, just here. And I see crypts and I see glands, therefore this must be duodenum, because the only one's going to have the glands of Brunner across underneath that line. So that is a small intestine because of the fingers, that's a duodenum because of the glands under the line. Alright, so the logic there, so find the organ and look at the characteristic. Duodenal glands, Brunner. Alright, let's do. Name the organ. Yeah, this is a small intestine. These are still fingers. For a large intestine, they'd have to be connected, right? But you notice you're getting more goblet cells. So that could mislead you, but they're still fingery. So this is, you're getting closer and closer to the large intestine. So which part would be the last part of the small intestine? It's my ileum. I'm becoming more large intestine-ish. So I have fingers, I have crypts, but I have more mucosal production. So I'm becoming an ileum. Yes. We haven't gotten there yet. So we'll do some pyre patches. Alright? I'll get there. That's an ileum. Still large intestine. Okay, so this is a small intestine. These are still fingery. That, though, is strange. What is that thing there from last term? Alright, so let's review. The last lab you did last term, you had things that had dark rings and light rings that contain lymphocytes, reticular connective tissue, and they were called lymph nodes. But this is a lymph node embedded in the organ. So what we call lymph nodes are embedded in your intestines. Peyer's patches. This is a Peyer's patch. Is a lymph node that's buried actually in the organ itself. So a Peyer's patch is a lymph node, reticular tissue, in the organ. Yes.
So is it found just in the ileum or is it?
It can be anywhere from the biggest in the ileum. The ileum normally is where you see most of them. So you're going to see, if you see these big, round, funny-looking, remember reticular tissue from 231 looks like leopard spots? You see that in the organ, that's going to be a Peyer's patch. If you're keeping all that crud out of your body, you ate. Let me do another Peyer's patch here. This is a weird view, but they cut up line. Look at these three dark spots here. Those are lymph nodes in the organ. So these are Peyer's patches. They're actually within the small intestine.
Are they always in the mucosa layer?
Yes, they're going to be basically crammed in the mucosa under the epithelial layer.
Does it still do like the interstitial exchange?
So this is mostly where white blood cells hang out. So their job basically is to eat stuff.
Okay. So that, do they come out? Are they like hanging out now? Do they come out?
They don't have to.
Will that presence mostly signify the ileum on these slides?
Yes. So here's some more Peyer's patches. Can you find them?
Yeah.
Right here. Right. Here's one. Here's one. There's part of one. Here's one. Here's another little one. So you're seeing these dark circles underneath the mucosa. They look kind of like odd man out. Right? So here's my mucosa, and here's these dark things before I get for them. That's going to be a Peyer's patch, or a lymph tissue. So they increase as you get closer and closer to your poop. Right? So they're going to increase as you go through the body. We'll talk about that today in lecture about why you eat, why you care. But you see that type of structure, you're going to say Peyer's patch, because that's what you're going to say. Let me show you the review here. Did anyone find a Peyer's patch for me? Yeah, so it's good. Blah, that thing. Right? So look for reticular tissue, usually looks dark and light. It's buried in the mucosa, kind of looks like a cancer, crams everything out of the way.
Oh, I see.
Okay.
So did you see the neck in the small intestine?
It'd be in the finger, and on our slides you usually can't see it. It's really faint. Did you okay on your tiger's patches? Yes. Okay, so those are the GI tract organs. Now life gets harder. Because you're supposed to know the organs that aren't directly in the GI tract, like this one. This is from last term. Remember this organ?
It's the mouth.
Tongue! How did you know it was a tongue? Stratified squamous, and remember the papilla from last term, your taste buds? So you're supposed to know what tongue we use. Oh. Right. I think that's one.
It's in the middle of page 8.
Yeah, we can put a slide up and say, is it a tongue or not? Yeah, but I'm not asking histology, I'm saying is it a tongue? It's different. Right? I'm seeing if I had a plastic tongue. Right? So I could put a tongue slide up there, say.
Could you show us the slide and tell us how we would recognize it again?
Sure.
Please.
So, I would say, well, I know it has to be someplace in my mouth or throat because it's stratified squamous. Your throat doesn't have these bumps. Here, here, here. So I have to go back to last term and realize those are the bumps on my tongue, my taste buds, my papilla. If you see bumpy esophagus, that's going to be a tongue. Right? If that were flat or just rolly, it would be your esophagus.
So technically then you could ask us anything.
Yes.
Say the font, what it, look at the size of the thing, what it is, like
Yes.
the pharynx.
Yes. Good. You have it. Very legit. So, this one.
That's not fair.
It is fair.
There's a lot of stuff that
Yeah, there is. I'm going to get this sympathy from me. Right? You think this is hard, you haven't done any nursing school yet. So, let's go to this one. The liver, how'd you know? It says you saw where I clicked.
Because it doesn't look like anything we've seen before.
That's right. So on a liver slide, it's really hard to make out, but you see a lot of white and red lines that just go every which way. So there's no real structure to it. So that's going to be a liver. Right? So to prove that, let me show you another liver slide. This is a close-up of the liver slide. So what do you see? I see white and red stuff all over the map. Right? But there's no layers, there's no fingers, there's none of that. So I'm looking for white and red. They sort of make these, looks like, I learned it, we learned from Mount St. Helens, it's like a volcano, this is the ash and lava flowing out of it, or mud puddle. So you're seeing white and red spreading out everywhere. That would be a liver histology.
Is this right here you're talking about?
Yes.
There's
Mm-hmm.
lines.
Yes.
So everything above that
Yes.
is lines.
Yes. Is it close up of the center of the liver there? So again, white and red circles and lines spreading out. See that? That's a liver.
What about all the specifics for the histology?
Oh, we're getting there. We should check this out. Let me throw some more liver action. So name that. This liver's what we're talking about, right? So the trick is I'm looking in these kind of big areas, and I see white and red. Describe it however you want, but white and red stuff spreading out. So only the liver would have that look of a bunch of white and red stuff in areas. So these do have names. This section where all the white and red stuff is in, that's a lobule, like you did with your thymus gland last term, right? So those are lobules, and this white and red is in each lobule has that sort of white and red motif to it. Right? So you're supposed to name some things. So the red stuff are the cells. How would you call cells in your liver? Take a guess. Hepatocytes. Hepatic means liver. The white stuff is space. How would you say space? Sinusoids in this case, little sinuses. So the red is hepatocytes, the white are sinusoids in the lobule, which is the big circle. So you have your hepatocytes and your sinusoids. Here's where life gets a little harder. In the center of each lobule, there's always a bigger space in white, right there. In the center. Take a guess what that's called.
Central vein.
Central vein. So in the center of each group, there should be a big vein like that. So that's your central vein, center of the lobule. Let me show you that again, a different view. There we go. This is a close-up of the center of the lobule. So red things, what are these? Parasite. White things, what are these? Big white thing.
Central vein.
Central vein. If you notice, there's blood in it. So the central vein is the big circle in the center of that sort of honeycomb look. So each lobule would have a white thing near the center. Not always visible, but you get the gist. Okay? Let me prove that to you. So name that white thing in the center. Central vein. That's just showing a nice clean picture of it. Central vein, here's the lava flowing away from the crater. You okay? Okay. Then when you get to the corners of the lobule, when you get to the corners of the room, you go up where my mouse is, you go up near the corner. So, like here, you come here, here. If you go to the corners, look carefully, there's three things in that corner. There's a tube here, and a tube there. How do we say three? Triads. That's called your portal triad. It's the corners of the lobules. So there would be one of these in each corner. You can't always see it. But there'd be three things in each corner, and that's a portal triad. So each corner would have three pipes. The middle has one big pipe, and the rest of it is red and white. Not yet? All right. Starting to hear tears. That's good. So if you zoom in on the corner, that's what it would look like. We don't have a slide this good. But these are the three things that would be in the corner. That's your triad. There are three of them.
Do we need to know each one?
No. On paper, you have to know what they are, not a slide.
So that's where the bile duct, the portal vein, and the arterial.
Very good. Yes, those three things are in the. Let me see if I can.
And did you just say we know that you have to do it on paper, not on slide?
Right. So we don't have any slides this good that would show that.
Okay.
So what you would have to do on a slide is the liver. You can see a lobule. You can see the central vein. Our slides usually can't see the triad very well.
So how would a question be structured to ask for like this bile duct?
I wouldn't ask that on a slide. I would say, name something in your triad. Or, name three things in a triad. And where is this found in the triad? So I can do it that way, but I wouldn't ask on the slide. Something of the liver part. Let's make life impossibly difficult. Because now we can choose something else. Name the organ. I don't say the liver.
Pancreas.
Pancreas. How'd you know this was pancreas from last term? Islet of Langerhans. Here's the problem on your quiz next week. The liver slide and pancreas slide look exactly the same. They're red with lines in white. So to your eye, you're going to want to know that they're the same looking. You have to make out either the islet or the lobule, because they look exactly the same. They're red and white cells everywhere. So spend time with the pancreas and liver side by side, say they're the same. You know the difference. So, for example, this one here. Is this a liver or a pancreas?
Pancreas.
How'd you know? Yeah, so here's the islet over here. Slightly different. If you just looked at this part, you'd say, well, that looks kind of like red and white lines. That's a liver. But no, but this is different. So when you're doing liver and pancreas, look at the whole thing and see if it's islets or those lobules. Very similar looking. Yes. We'll do that in just a second.
Say pancreas doesn't have lobules.
It doesn't have lobules in the sense of lobules. So here's a pancreas slide. So it can have lines, but it doesn't make those rooms with a center. Right? So there's no real room with a center hole in here. There's rooms. Here's the islet of Langerhans. Right? So that may deceive you. Well, it's got lobules. Well, that's not a lobule with a circle in the center and portal triads. Nope, this is not a liver. That's just a blood vessel. That's an islet. That's just blood vessel. But that's not a triad. Make sense? Okay. Yeah, so The red and white cells are the acini cells. You learned that last term, I think. The red and whites are the acinis, and the islets contain the alphas and the betas. Right? The acinis are everywhere, but not the islet. One more slide to go. I'll hit you with it. Let's do. Name the organ. Go. Go. No. No. But no. It's a salivary gland. Okay. Let's prove why I knew it wasn't the other ones. Okay. No fingers, no mucosa, nothing. So that means it's a liver pancreas. Well, it's not a liver because I don't see red and white and globules. It's not a pancreas because I don't see islets and Langerhans. So your last choice is it's a salivary gland. The way you know a salivary gland is it's going to have red cells and white cells interspersed like this. They just look like cells in some kind of random distribution. Let me show you what I mean by that. There's no lobules, there's no islets. That's for you. Here's a salivary gland. I see red, I see white, they're little puffy areas, but there's no lobule and there's no islet. So it just looks like puffy cells everywhere. Right? So the trick is the dark cells have a different name than the light cells. Anyone know what the dark cells are called? Serosal cells or serous cells. The white cells are called mucosal cells. The red ones make liquid, the white ones make mucus, and together they make spit.
Can you do that? What are the red ones again?
Red ones are serosal, serosa. They make fluid. The white ones are mucosal. They make mucus. You put water and mucus together, you create spit. The duct would be the tubings. Here's one here.